Hey everyone, Pix here with our first check-in for the Venus retrograde coming up on July 22nd. The Venus retrograde will be in Leo at 28 degrees, and we are officially in Venus's shadow period, the retrograde shadow period, which started June 19th. So we're probably seeing some themes pop up already, which is a great time to get into it. So, retrogrades seem a bit intimidating, but they're not always a bad thing, and especially with Venus. In this episode, I'm going to be guiding you through crucial things you need to know about this particular Venus retrograde. And do stick around till the end because the last point is my personal favorite. It's a very neat astrology hack that is not good to miss out on. It's too good to miss out on. So number one, retrogrades in general involve looking back into the past. Astronomically, retrogrades are when a planet appears to be moving backwards in the sky. They are seen as a period of introspection, going backwards, going within, revisiting past situations, and reevaluating various aspects of our lives depending on where in your chart it's happening. Number two, relationship stress tests come up with Venus retrogrades. Rethinking, reconsidering, reapplying strategies in your relationships are all common. In romantic relationships, you might revisit old arguments or unresolved issues. If it's a professional relationship, maybe diving back into previously overlooked disagreements, friends, family, old issues with them. Again, the type of relationship often depends on which house topics Venus rules in your chart. That means your Libra house and your Taurus house, as well as which house topics Leo governs, because that's where Venus is stationing. Venus retrograde brings new chapters, especially for those of you who are Leo risings. Taurus risings and Libra risings as well, but especially Leo risings, it is your turn this time. Why Libra risings? Why Taurus risings? Because Venus is your ruling planet, and whenever it stations retrograde, it stops, which brings about turning points for y'all with your ruling planet. On the other hand, Leo risings with Venus retrograde happening on your ascendant or in your ascendant sign. Why is the ascendant so important? Why is Venus on your ascendant so important? The ascendant is the most important part of your chart. Your natal chart is a map of the sky the moment you are born. Your ascendant sign is the constellation that was on the horizon the moment you were popped out of your mama. So Leo risings, when they were born, Leo, the constellation of Leo, was exactly on the horizon. And the symbology with this is that the moment you are popped out, born, is the same moment Leo, the constellation, is being born into the sky at the same time, rising in the horizon. So that's why those constellations, that's why those signs are imprinted on our personality and our identity and are our ascendant signs, and why they are the most important. They really set the stage. I digress. So Venus stationing retrograde on your ascendant sign signifies a turning point or a new chapter. It involves maybe a new phase of a relationship, a shift in personal values, or changes on how you approach love, or changes on how you approach beauty or money. So expanding on these specific turning points, examples could include starting a new relationship, ending a relationship, or starting a new phase of a relationship, starting a new relationship dynamic. Also changing your career path or a shift in your lifestyle in general. These are all turning points that are possible. So let's talk about some specific real-life examples of Venus retrogrades. The last Venus retrograde in Leo was 2015, and for me personally, I was it's in my 10th house. The Venus retrograde in Leo was in my 10th house. I was reorganizing my life after having gotten married a few months before and buying a house and moving all at the same time. And after getting married, after moving, my ex-husband and I were fighting more than ever before. It was terrifying. Also, I got laid off my job and I began yoga teacher training, which pivoted me into what I'm doing now. I met my mentor also during this Venus retrograde in my 10th house, and decided to start doing this. Like, I literally, prepping for this video, I went back, I looked in my journals, and I wrote all this shit down. I can't believe how much it was for a 10th house, you know, fighting more than ever with my husband, getting laid off my job, beginning yoga teacher training, meeting my mentor. Like, that's huge. So other stories, other Venus retrograde stories in general. One viewer shared their experience about the Gemini retrograde in 2012, which was also during their Saturn retrograde, or their Saturn return. So they decided at this time to prioritize their needs and drastically improve their life. They moved to a different state, left a house behind, which is very Venus retrograde. House, money, things. The retrograde happened in their 7th house also, and they were moving with their partner at the time. The Cap retrograde, the Cap Venus retrograde, was in their 12th house, and they experienced a mental break of some sort, resulting in losing their ability to feel anger. And this experience led them to prioritize self-care and prioritize healing. That's a big 12th house theme. And they emphasized that these retrogrades weren't necessarily times of immediate action, but they were periods of major life-changing decisions, and they set plans in motion. Another viewer shared their experience during the 2020 Venus retrograde in Gemini. And this was a retrograde in their 10th house. They had just started a new job, but they were facing significant bullying at work, which led to daily bouts of regret and tears. And during this stressful time, they managed to plan a meetup with their long-distance partner, which became the silver lining during that retrograde. Although the harsh work environment did persist until November, they do recall that the intensity and distress lessened after the retrograde. This is that social tension that I was talking about. So this retrograde taught them a lesson in self-worth and futility of trying to please people who don't like you. So those are just some examples. If you have any examples of what happened during the last Venus retrogrades that you can remember, please drop them in the comments. I'd love to add them to my research. So the other thing about turning points, they affect future decision making. So transitions like that happen during Venus retrogrades, or new chapters that happen during Venus retrogrades, definitely influences future decisions, and especially related to relationships and money and beauty and all the Venus things. It's like setting up a bow to sling it forward, a setup for the next 8 years, which we will get into later. My last point. So to navigate a turning point during Venus retrograde, you got to stay open-minded. You got to stay adaptable. It's important to reassess your values at this time. And again, communicate effectively. Work on your communication skills. So not only does Venus retrograde usher in personal changes, but it can also be associated with scandals, which is my 4th point. Venus retrograde and their association with scandals, they act as events that can challenge societal norms. And this is symbolic. You know, retrogrades are symbolically connected to events that go against the grain because they themselves are going against the grain. So this translates to Venus retrogrades being about love, beauty, social norms. So going against Venus's grain potentially leads us to unusual or controversial situations. Again, Venus governs social concerns, relationships, and what is normal in society. So when Venus is retrograde, this is a time of more charged, delicate, or complicated social situations sometimes, and sometimes even societal breaking points. And we will talk about examples in a moment. So Venus retrogrades can, let's hone in on the relationship part of Venus retrogrades. So if Venus rules relationships, then Venus retrogrades can definitely lead to scandals with relationships, such as infidelity, breakups, divorces. All of these are challenging the societal norms and are scandalous. I mean, think about whenever you hear about people breaking up in general, maybe not in my sphere, we like people breaking up. We say to dump them in my sphere, but to those of you who don't know me and are just joining us, breakups can be scandalous because people are always like, work harder, you know? Did you try hard enough? Did you pull out every resource you had to make it work? If you don't do that, it's scandalous, or it's kind of like, oh, wow, they just gave up. They just broke up, you know, gossip. So breaking up, divorces, and infidelity, of course, is a scandal as well. All of these challenge society, or they don't challenge society, but they challenge societal norms. You're supposed to stay together for the kids, right? We're changing that, but still, I don't know if it's the norm to break up. It is literally statistically the norm to break up, but societally, So scandals during Venus retrograde serves as societal pushback against the challenging of the norms. So it's like you push back against the norms and society pushes back on you with scandal or gossip. So Venus retrogrades can highlight the divide between, you know, what is socially accepted and what isn't, which leads to debates, discussions, conflicts, and let's talk about some examples of public events that happened during some Venus retrograde periods. I'm going to go in order. I'm going to start with 2007, Leo Virgo retrograde, Venus retrograde. The subprime mortgage crisis did indeed begin to unravel significantly in 2007, marking the beginning of the financial crisis of 2007-2008. Venus rules money. There you go. All right. So the next one was in Aries, Pisces. That was March, April of 2009. And this was when Bernie Madoff pleaded guilty to running the biggest fraudulent Ponzi scheme in U.S. history. And that is a scandal. And also money. Okay. The Venus retrograde of October, November 2010 was in Libra or Scorpio. WikiLeaks began releasing diplomatic cables in late November 2010, most of which were classified, leading to the major global scandal of WikiLeaks. Love that one. That is society. That is scandal. Okay, and in December 2013, January 2014, Bridgegate scandal, Capricorn Aquarius retrograde. This was when the lanes of George Washington Bridge were closed, which caused massive traffic jams. A bunch of people stalled. There are multiple layers of Venus there. The other scandal I want to talk about was in 2018, October, November of 2018, Libra Scorpio. The Facebook Cambridge Analytical Data scandal was making headlines throughout 2018, but the public revelations and investigations about the event reached its peak in 2018, in October of 2018. More scandals, more Facebook, social scandals. The last Venus retrograde point I want to talk about with this example is June or May of 2020, a Venus retrograde in Gemini. This was when George Floyd was murdered, which sparked global protests against police brutality and systemic racism and a lack of police accountability, all very Venus. So let's talk about Venus's cycle. Venus retrogrades in the same sign every 8 years. So 8 years ago, in July to September of 2015, Venus went retrograde in Leo. So you can look back to those dates to get an idea of what sort of themes might come up. Main thing you're going to look at your calendar or your journal from July to September of 2015 to get an idea of what sort of themes to expect. You can also look at which house topics Leo rules in your chart. as well as which house topics Venus rules in your chart. So the main events we're looking at, the main houses we're looking at are Leo house topics, Taurus house topics, and Libra house topics. These topics are getting a little bit of a reorganization, a revamp, a look back, all of the things we've been discussing. And I kind of want to talk about Venus retrograde natively, because I think a few of you that are watching might have Venus retrograde natively. How do you know if you have Venus retrograde in your chart? The easiest way, besides using an ephemeris, which many of us don't know how to read, looking at your chart, looking at Venus in the chart, and seeing if there is a little red R or a little RX, that means it's retrograde, right next to the symbol of Venus. Or if there's an S, that means it's stationing, and that is also very relevant, and that may or may not be a red S. So if you do have the red S or the red R next to your Venus, or if you know someone who does, people that have this, whatever house topics that Venus rules in their chart will stand out. Maybe be a little bit odd, a little bit different, provocative, controversial, against the norms. Remember, we were talking about against the grain earlier. Anti-hero, rogue, going rogue, against social or societal conventions, and help change them for the better. Things are switched up oftentimes with Venus topics when you have Venus retrograde. And at some point in your life, it will station direct by secondary progression, and that will be a very, very big time for y'all. Another thing, people born with Venus retrograde natally are more sensitive to Venus retrogrades. So as a quick recap, retrogrades in general are a time of reflection, especially about our past. Venus retrograde itself can act as a stress test, a relationship stress test, prompting us to rethink and reassess current relationships and relationship dynamics. For those of you with Leo rising, this is the beginning of a new chapter for y'all. I'd love to hear what your new chapter was in 2015, and that might give us a hint on what to expect for this new chapter. Venus retrogrades have historically been associated with scandals, challenging societal norms, and causing shakeups. And last but not least, remember that 8-year Venus retrograde cycle. Look back on the themes from 8 years ago to predict possibly themes of what will be coming up. So I encourage you all to take time to look at your own charts to reflect on how the past Venus retrogrades have played out in your life. The patterns are surprising. I was pissing myself with shock when I was looking at all the research for this. So next time, we're going to be diving into how Venus retrogrades affect specific houses in your chart for each rising sign. So make sure that you subscribe and hit the notification bell to stay updated. I also encourage you to bring your reflections and your questions either in the comments or into the 9th House Discord server. It's always fascinating to read everyone's experiences and insights. So there we have it, folks. The 5 crucial things you need to know about the upcoming Venus retrograde in Leo. Don't forget to try out the hack that we talked about, the 8-year hack. Look back, assess, and anticipate. It is a game changer. And if you enjoyed this video and want to delve deeper into astrology with me, remember you can check out Pix's Fellowship, which offers personalized horoscopes weekly and monthly. Or if you would like a more intimate astrological discussion, you can book a one-on-one consultation with me. And of course, please join the free 9th House Discord to keep the Astro Convo flowing. That's what we got, y'all. Thank you so much. I will see you next time. Bye.